Hello and welcome to Theme Park Information. In today's show, we're doing an in-depth episode for Thorpe Park, which is located near London in the county of Surrey. This is a theme park I've been going to since the year 2000 when Tideway first opened. So I'd like to think I've gone through it enough times to know what I'm talking about. Famous last words there, I'm afraid. But let's get straight to it with the roller coasters. Now, they have 5 major roller coasters, Thorpe Park. Let's start off with Colossus, which pretty much put this park on the map in many ways. It was the world's first 10 looping roller coaster, a really cool ride when it opened, really, out of nowhere, because this park was not that, well known or, developed at the time, and then it suddenly just come up with this absolute, behemoth of a ride with 10 inversions, and it actually was pretty damn amazing when it first opened. I mean, it just hasn't aged well. Unfortunately, it needs some tender love and care. It needs someone to repaint it. It needs, possibly better trains on it as well. I think the trains are very much dated nowadays, and they possibly need to be redone. I have to say, some of it is actually quite rough and uncomfortable nowadays, which is a real shame, because this was actually a real gem of a coaster when it opened. I remember this on opening day with the season pass holders when it first opened, before it was open to the rest of the public, and it was absolutely awesome. Like, I managed to get on it at least 10 times, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And now I go on it about once, and I'm like, nah, that's enough. it's just too rough, I'm afraid. Following that, we do actually have Nemesis Inferno. And I actually will be honest, I think this is one of the most underappreciated, underrated roller coasters in the country. Has 4 really good inversions. It's quite an intense ride. It's smooth, comfortable. It's quite well themed. The station looks awesome, being the colour of Volcano Mountain. It has a really cool station drop into a really well themed, if they work, tunnel with like smoke and lighting. Unfortunately, I have been on it quite a few times where that hasn't been on. It's one of those rides where the effects really do add stuff to it. But overall, it's a really, really good ride. And the fact that it was built a year after they constructed Colossus is really cool. Following that, they actually also constructed Stealth. This was in 2006, so it's 12 years ago, which is quite a while. And I will be honest, I think there's a few disappointments with this ride. I think the fact that it's not the tallest in the UK is slightly disappointing. I think the fact that it has over-the-shoulder restraints instead of a lap bar is also really disappointing. The fact that Top Thrill Dragster has a lap bar should say all you need to know about what this ride should have. The fact it's 205 foot is really respectable. The launch is pretty awesome on it as well, but it's a pretty short ride. It could be doing a lot more of the space it actually is in. And the fact also as well that last time I went to Thorpe Park, this actually had one hell of a queue as well for it. But overall, it's still quite a fun ride, and it's a bit of an icon for Thorpe Park as well. It's, generally speaking, I was very excited when they built it, because they actually pretty much just removed like the model village and repositioned Flying Fish to build it, and that's the sort of thing you do as a theme park. You remove like lesser attractions and put something which is better in its place. Following that, they actually have Saw the ride, which is obviously based on the Saw horror films, which I have to say they use the licensing very well. It's really well themed. It really encapsulates the kind of like the traps and like kind of horror of the films and stuff like that very well. It's a really interesting ride to be waiting in line for, because there's so much attention to detail. And actually, I'll tell you what, the queue for it flies along. It has really good operations. The last time I was there, a really busy day, where I was soon on it. Couldn't quite believe it. I thought I'd be queuing for ages to go on it. I have to say that I've heard rumours that this is, from other people, this is a really rough ride. And I've never found them to be true. I've always found it to be somewhat smooth. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not butter smooth, but it's it's very, it's not uncomfortable, it's not rattling. I don't get off with a headache or backache, or my shoulders don't hurt. I've always found it pretty reasonable, pretty comfortable. Like, I could probably ride it several times a day and not have any problems with it. I do understand that certain people will find rides rough and some people won't. It happens, so each to their own in that regard. Anyway, moving on to a ride I think we can all agree is pretty smooth, and that is the Swarm. Their newest roller coaster opened in 2012, and this B&M flying wing coaster even is pretty damn special in my opinion. It's probably the second best ride in the country. That's a big shout. but it has the theming, it has comfort, smoothness, it has really cool inversions, interaction, it uses the land really well, the area it's in. It's a very pretty looking ride, and it also has several kind of special effects, e.g. fire, water, smoke, which really enhance the experience, both on and off ride. It just is really, really good ride, a really good attraction for Thorpe Park. And generally speaking, yeah, I mean, I think Nemesis is better than this, but I think that's it. I think it's probably, yeah, second best ride in the UK. Moving on from that, Thorpe Park is pretty much home to an absolute load of thrill rides, and on the whole, they're really cool. I am generally really saddened by the news and developments that the Slammer has since closed and will remain closed for the it's going to be standing but not operational. Really, really sad about that, because it was actually one hell of an attraction. Really intense, really thrilling, and when it worked, it was absolutely awesome. I'm so happy that whenever I saw it open, I went on it. And it's just such a shame to see it shut, because it was a great ride. But then they still have really good attractions like Samurai. Obviously, they still have Rush, which is actually really cool. They do obviously have Vortex as well, and I will be honest, I used to really, really love Vortex when I was younger, but I keep on having really rubbish rides on it. It's really, really annoying me. It's like I can't seem to get it where it's a really, really good ride on that at the minute. Such a shame, because it's such a cool ride, and I've had so many good times on it, but it's just a real frustration at the minute there. And then moving on, obviously we have Detonator, which is a ride which one of my friends refuses to go on because he hates how it feels. It's just so intense. It pretty much forces you to go towards the ground. Most drop towers just drop you, that's it. This physically pushes you down with real force, and I can understand fully why people don't like it. Moving on, obviously they're water rides now. I will be honest, I used to consider Thorpe Park to be the kind of king for water rides. They also have Tidal Wave, which is still really good fun, absolute soaker, really well themed, but it's become less of a must-do attraction as the park's developed. They have a reasonably cool Rapids ride, nothing too special, doesn't get you soaking wet, but it's somewhat fun. They also have Depth Charge, which is an absolute classic, really cool, love going on it. Sadly, the future of Logger's Leap is very much undetermined at the moment. I will be honest, I love Logger's Leap. I think it's a really, really good ride. Generally speaking, it always used to fly through the queue. It used to be pretty picturesque, scenic, really good ride. Always found it really enjoyable. I really hope it gets back up and running sooner or later, even though I have heard rumours that they're going to replace it with a roller coaster, which I would say is a very acceptable thing to replace it with. It's just a shame that that's the ride which unfortunately is given away. I've heard that it was maybe in disrepair and that parts running out as well. So there's not 100% convinced that that's actually what's happened. There's been very little information out there about it. They obviously also do have one of the worst rides I've ever been on in Storm Surge. Oh, I wish that'd be torn down. I will be honest, actually, I'll see if I have a few ideas what they could replace it with. How about a Wind Seeker? I think that'd fit Thorpe Park absolutely perfectly, and that's the sort of ride which would fit very nicely in that space. It's actually a park, and I have talked about this in my Thorpe Park development video, where it's a park which hasn't developed anywhere near as much as I thought it would do. I know there was huge rumours, including in their midterm development plan, about a 2015 coaster. We are still waiting for that. It's like, it kind of saddens me somewhat that Alton Towers has been able to build 2 roller coasters in the time that Thorpe Park hasn't built any. And considering those are the 2 pretty much flagship parks, you'd think they'd be very much competing against each other to have a really good lineup of roller coasters and of rides. And it's a real shame, because Thorpe Park could be one of the best theme parks in Europe, and instead it's just one of the best theme parks in the UK. Don't get me wrong, there's still a huge amount to do at Thorpe Park, and they haven't so much been removing their rides for no reason, unlike Alton Towers. So I at least have somewhat sympathy, some amount of sympathy for them, in the fact that so look, obviously if there's problems with Logger's Leap, they have to shut it. obviously that could completely throw out all your development plans you have, and like, a little bit with like Slammer as well. You actually have a high quality, high capacity thrill ride, which then no longer can be operated. Again, you have to replace it at some point. I will also be honest, Thorpe Park always gets a bit of a reputation for the sort of people who are actually there as well. I've actually been reading on the Coaster Force forums recently about Thorpe Park having a bit of a clientele problem. Never found that to be the case. I've always found that the people there are just there to have a good time. In fact, I've actually had some, generally decent people there. If you can have a chat to, keep themselves stuff like that. Never really had a problem with it. Just something that I saw while searching online the other day. I will also be honest that this park really does need a proper hotel as well. I know there's been a lot of talk about the development of that as well, and I think it kind of fits in with the development problems. It's kind of all over the place, really. It's really disappointing that that's kind of happened to what was a really solid theme park. It has to also be said, moving on for it, because I don't want to just get stuck on development. This actually has some really interesting food options, like pretty much like Alton Towers has pretty much got rid of their like KFC and like Burger King and pizza options. Oh, actually, some McDonald's at Alton Towers, whereas Thorpe Park has pretty much still got their Burger King and stuff like that, which is really strange that their food options are somewhat different to the others in their chain. It's just a little bit of an interesting one. I mean, I've always found food at Thorpe Park to be pretty decent. I've always found the park to be pretty clean, tidy, well maintained. There's a couple of areas which probably need to be redone. Like, for example, I hate the fact that when you're queuing in line for Rush, you can literally see all the loads of generators just on the side path. It's like, just enclose them, chaps. It's like, just keep it a little bit tidier and neater. It's like, just kind of feel that Thorpe Park is a generally good theme park though. It's really good. I mean, I will be honest, one of the only other problems I have with it is the fact it has this really rubbish slogan, which is an island like no other. Oh dear. I mean, you could argue technically see the points of peninsula and not an island, but yeah, it's something. It's not a great slogan for a theme park, I'm afraid. I have to also say that very good props on their Friday nights. They do put a lot of effort in. They generally work really hard on improving those. And I also will say that the car park of Thorpe Park and main entrance really needs to be redeveloped and worked around. It's a sort of theme park where it's actually got a really good part. The park itself is really nice. There's just a few bits here and there which just really need to be modernised and turned from what is effectively quite a grey kind of concretey environment to something a little bit more inviting and special. Alton Towers, for example, has a great car park, like over a sprawling area with loads of trees and works really nicely with the monorail and stuff like that. But no, Thorpe Park is generally a really solid theme park. I am really looking forward to them actually building a new roller coaster sooner or later and generally doing some really good park improvements, because it's all they really need to do to become one of the best in Europe. Anyway guys, feel free to leave your comments on Thorpe Park and what you make of it, and like, comment and subscribe for more theme park information. I'll catch you guys on the next video.